Welcome, folks. Thanks for joining us. We're just waiting while we fill up with participants. As you're logging on, please don't hesitate to introduce yourselves in the webinar chat. Take a moment to glance at participants and see who else you know. Okay, I think we are just about there with our folks joining us. Welcome. Thank you for joining us. Welcome to Impact 100's Grant Applicant Information Session. I'm Kim Kern. I'm the Executive Director. Before we get started, I wanted to go over a few details. Those of you who are just logging in, please take a moment to introduce yourselves in the chat so you can see who else is participating in this information session. If you have questions throughout the session, which will run about an hour today, please put those in the Q&A section of the webinar feature so that we can separate chat from Q&A. Also, you'll see here on the screen that we are recording this session, and it will be placed on Impact 100's website for later viewing throughout our grants process over the course of the next month or so. So this will be a tool that you can reference again, and we are recording today to make that so. Welcome, thank you everyone for introducing yourselves. Okay, logistics out of the way. My name is Kim Kern. I am the Executive Director of Impact 100 Philadelphia. We are thrilled to see so many members of our nonprofit community joining us today for this grant applicant information session. This is the official kickoff of our application process this year, and our goals for today, which are really reflected in the agenda, are to make sure that we provide you as an applying nonprofit with a clear picture of who we are, what we fund, a sense of what our process is, and important dates for this, our 2023-2024 grant making year. I am joined by Impact 100 members who will be overseeing our grant making process this year, as well as one of our 2023 grantees who will share his organization's experience with the process. And those folks are Alice Berman and Anna Maria DiDio, who are our grants committee co-chairs. We're also joined by Alice Hausman and Denise Horan, who are our nonprofit liaison committee co-chairs. Maurice Q. Jones is the founding executive director and general manager of People Advancing Reintegration, or PAR Recycle Works. PAR Recycle Works was a 2023 $100,000 recipient of Impact 100 funding. And finally, Denise Rainier, who co-chairs our financial review panel, and we'll be talking about that component of our application process. A common practice at Impact 100 is to begin all of our conversations about our work with our mission to remind ourselves of what it is that we do and why. And there you have it in front of you, what our mission is, which is to engage women in collectively funding high impact grants that address unmet needs in the Philadelphia region, raising the profile of smaller nonprofit organizations in the process. And through this work, our goals are to make the community more just, more equitable, more healthy for everyone. Of course, our grant making is the way that we realize our mission, and that's what you're here to learn more about today. Here is a sense of our grant making model, and we actually have two components at play right in this moment. One is that we are currently open for members, for renewing and new members to join Impact 100 Philadelphia, and their donations are what constitute our grants pool. That building will happen now through November 15th, and those are steps 1 through 3 on the slide in front of you right now. Simultaneously, here on October 30th, we are opening our application to you, the nonprofit community. That will be open from October 30th today through November 29th, and that is step 5 on the slide in front of you. So hopefully that makes sense, that there's these sort of two concurrent pieces happening at the same time right now. And then what does that mean for you, our applicants, in terms of our growth, and what kind of a grant pool could we consider for this year? Well, at previous years, when we first started in 2008, we had 111 members and were able to make a single $100,000 grant. Last year, we were able to fund each of our focus areas, which we will be listing in a few minutes for you, but we were able to provide a grant in each of our focus areas, and that grants pool total was just over $360,000. So for reference, last year, 3 grants were 100,000 and 2 were slightly smaller than that. who were our grantees last year. It is always a pleasure and an honor to be able to recognize those folks who were recipients of our democratically decided funding. And they were the Domestic Violence Center of Chester County, Pennsylvania Prison Society, People Advancing Reintegration or PAR Recycle Works, the Public Interest Law Center, and Scribe Video Center. These are each organizations doing tremendous work in their areas, in their communities. We were honored to be supporters of their work last year. That all being said is an overview of this next hour and who we are at Impact. I'm going to hand it over to Alice Hausman, who's going to take you through the rest of this next section of our time together. Alice.
Thanks, Kim. I'm going to talk a little bit about what we look for in our proposals. We make general operating grants, so we don't need a proposal that for a particular program. Proposals can focus on programs or services or administration or infrastructure. And we really want to know about your organization. So your proposal should explain kind of who you are, what your central mission is, who benefits from your services, how this particular grant will strengthen your organization and your mission, any information about how you execute its mission and serve your constituency, any evidence of effects that you have. Most importantly, we look for why now. Why is the timing of this grant and its size going to have a high impact on your organization and the people it serves? So, and I can't stress strongly enough how important this piece is for your proposal and what we look for in the review. Nope. What we don't fund is debt reduction or operating deficits or bridge funding or endowment funding. We don't fund individuals or private foundations. We don't fund activities that are religious or political in nature. Now, we will fund religious institutions, but the activities themselves can't be religious in nature. We also will not fund funding drives or annual appeals, funding events, or general capital campaigns. I'm now going to turn this over to Denise Rainier, who will talk about eligibility from the financial perspective.
Well, thank you very much, Alice. The organizational eligibility is just the first piece of how we take a look at your organization. And these are probably not a surprise to you if you've been with us before. We look for you to be tax exempt under the IRS 501c3, your base of operations serving the residents of the 5 counties in southeastern Pennsylvania. The most critical one probably for you all is this third bullet point. We look for 3 years of financial statements, audited or independently reviewed. And that's important because there's a third kind of financial statement that we do not accept. So we're looking for audited or independently reviewed financial statements. And then a bank account in the local organization's name. You can be affiliated with another organization, but the funds must be in the local organization name. And finally, not a recipient of an Impact $100,000 grant in the past 3 grant cycles. So let's talk about the required financials. And in this category, we look for an income statement and balance sheet for the most recently completed fiscal year. So we're looking for those independently prepared financial statements, audited or reviewed for the past 3 full years. We mentioned that. But then to supplement that, we look for an income statement and balance sheet for the most recently completed year, because often there's a timing gap. And we want to make sure that we have the most recent information on your organization. Also, a budget for the current fiscal year, a year-to-date interim statement for the current fiscal year, and those audited or reviewed financial statements in the IRS Form 990s. Some of this information is easy for you to gather. Some of it might be internally gathered. We appreciate that. So we are open to talking to you about any questions you have about it, but these are the required financials for anyone to qualify. Local financials are required, and likely additional follow-up from Impact 100 if you happen to be a chapter of a national organization or you have some kind of collaboration. Those are kind of exception situations that we would like to just follow up with you and maybe ask a few more questions about. But these are the big ones. This is what we require for the organizations that move forward with us. And from here, I'll hand it over to Anna Maria, who's going to explain our Impact 100 focus areas.
Thank you, Denise. So, hello, everyone. I'm delighted to speak to you today about the grants process. So, Impact 100 applications are reviewed within one of 5 focus areas, which you can see on the slide. And as you best understand your organization and its mission, when you apply for a grant, choose the focus area in which you want to be considered. You should choose a focus area whose unmet needs your organization seeks to address. So we define those areas as follows. So I don't want to read all of these. We can get an idea of the definitions here: arts and culture, promoting and developing, enhancing artistic expression, education, teaching and informing and educating individuals or groups, environment, those that improve, preserve, protect our communities, family organizations that strengthen and enhance the lives of children and older adults, and finally, health and wellness, organizations that empower wellness as a way to strengthen and improve. So those are the 5 focus areas. So in addition to the eligibility criteria described just a few moments ago, we also have funding priorities. So these are not requirements. Organizations that do not meet all of these criteria are still eligible to receive funding, but each of these items should be considered a plus in favor of the applicant. Our members refer to this list throughout the application review process, but also consider information they learn on site visits and their discussion and review. So we believe that our funding sweet spot is an organization with an annual budget between $300,000 and $3 million. Generally, organizations of this size that are properly managed are well positioned to handle a grant of $100,000, and yet are small enough so that $100,000 can make a meaningful difference for the organization. We look to fund organizations that have programs or services that target underserved populations. Applicants have the opportunity to describe to us recipients of their services and how they are underserved. So our goal for grants is to help address unmet needs in the region and have a high impact on beneficiaries or communities being served. That's why we ask you to answer the question that Alice mentioned: why now? Why will a grant from us be particularly significant now to your organization, to your beneficiaries, and to the community that you serve? So we have a preference for organizations that are led by a staff and a board that reflect the diversity of the populations they serve. Because we recognize that developing a diverse executive team may be a work in progress, we invite you to describe the steps your organization is taking to move in that direction. Move in that direction of having a leadership team more representative of the population served. There are no direct questions on the application requesting demographic information for the board and leadership, but we welcome you to submit it or describe the questions about your organization's general DEI efforts. So if you'd like to apply for an impact grant, our website serves as a very important resource for you. The Apply for a Grant tab includes our eligibility criteria, a description of the application process, the important dates in our process, and a list of frequently asked questions regarding both general grants and new this year, specifically the financial requirements. The link to the recording of today's session will also be available for your reference, and that link will be sent shortly after the meeting. So you'll also be able to find the link to our request for funding application on Slide Room. So there are a number of things that are continuing and a number of things that are new. So we wanted to review those with you. We are continuing a streamlined, updated application and increased character limit. So we've modified the timing of our financial review submittal requirements. Now, as part of the initial application, as Denise mentioned, you'll be asked to submit 3 years of audited financial statements. Listed on the application, you'll find the financial requirements we will need if you are asked to move forward to the next phase. So please review this list carefully so that you're able to provide everything when we need it at a later date. So here are the dates, the key dates for the 23-24 grant cycle. So you'll complete. Here are the dates, 24 grant. You'll be completing our grant request application to one of our 5 focused areas by November 29th. All of the applications will be previewed by grants and financial review chairs to assure that the qualifications criteria, including the 3 years of audited financial statements, are met. So an impact committee in each of the focus areas will review the applications. So then the committee determines who will move forward in the process. Those organizations will be asked to provide additional financial documents for the financial review. In mid-February, we will notify all applicants if they move forward or not. But I think you will be informed by, let me just back up a minute and just say, you'll be informed by January 8th if you are not eligible. So we won't, for those organizations that move forward, you'll be notified, but you'll be informed by January 8th if you are not eligible. So in mid-February, we will notify applicants if they will move forward or not. In mid-February, we will notify applicants if they will move forward or not. Typically, we invite 8 to 12 organizations to the financial review per FAC. There is a short turnaround time of 5 days from the notification to submit to for submission deadline. So please be prepared with the checklist of the documents required. From this, the site visit selections will be made. Organizations will be notified March 22nd to 29, and site visits will be scheduled at a mutually convenient time between March 25th and April 24th. We typically select 3 to 4 organizations per FAC for site visits. If your organization is selected for a site visit, someone from Impact will reach out and connect with you about all the information that you'll need to prepare. So Impact understands that the time and energy necessary to prepare for a site visit is significant, and in recognition of that fact, we will continue to give organizations a $500 stipend if you're not selected as a finalist. After the site visits, each focus area group meets to review all the information and selects one finalist using a consensus model of decision-making. So throughout the proposal review process, members conduct a rigorous structured review and, I lost my place here, I'm sorry, rigorous structured review and the discussion among their members. So the focus area finalists will be notified in mid-May and will be asked to attend our annual meeting on June 4th, where we will award our grants. On our online applications is open today, October 30th, and we will be accepting applications until November 29th. In early December, we'll be announcing our funding total. That's the amount that will determine the number and the size of the grants we'll be able to award in June. In the last several years, as you heard, our grant pool has been large enough to allow us to provide at least 2 $100,000 grants and several smaller grants. So keep in mind, each year, there'll be a different group of members who will be reviewing your application. So these members may know nothing about your organization, its mission, or its effectiveness in reaching the community it hopes to serve. So your application provides you with an opportunity to highlight what is important about you and about the services you provide and how well you accomplish your goals. In addition, it's important that you clearly identify why this grant now would transform your organization. So I think you get the message why now is a pretty important part of the application. So Impact is continuing to provide operating grants, not project-based or specifically mission-focused. And that means the funding can be used for any project. We've already mentioned the preferred budget moved recently from $500,000 to $5 million to that $300,000 to $3 million. The application process is one process now, and we've made an effort to streamline your submission. So the organizations, of course, not selected for that site visit who are not awarded a grant will still receive that $500 honorarium. So new changes, shorten and streamline that application. The number of DEI related questions, which were not pertinent to our focus on organizations representing the constituency served. However, we did add back the requirement, as you've heard, to submit the 3 years of financials upfront. And this is to really facilitate the early review and qualification. So we're able to eliminate those that aren't able to provide that. To assist in that, we've added financial review office hours, and we'll get you the time for that. I think that's in November 14th. But we'll confirm that at the end of the session. A link will be provided and follow-up email will be sent for that financial review session. So as far as communications goes, I won't read out all of the email addresses here. You'll have this presentation, you'll have these directives, but all communications and applications and notifications regarding the process will continue to come from info@impact100philly.org. So please add this to your address book. All applications will receive notifications from info@impact100philly.org at each stage of the grant process, which includes requesting financials, requesting a site visit, selection of a finalist. So it's important that you select an email address that is, it's important that you put the email address on your application is one that we'll be able to use throughout this process. That's the email address that we'll be using to communicate with you. So if the person who submitted the application is no longer working with you or something happens during the year, or if the email address on your application changes, you won't receive any of the subsequent emails that Impact will send to follow up with this process. So it's important because we have tight timelines around some of these turnarounds with financials and such, and we'll be asking for prompt response. So you may be also contacted by someone from the financial review panel or by a focus area committee chair for extra information if a question comes up. So they may use their individual email addresses. So we do our best to flag these and make sure they have a subject matter that'll get your attention. But it's easy to miss if you're not looking for these things. So be mindful of that. Okay, so that's really where we are with the process. And now to hear from one of our recipients, it's my honor to turn this over to and introduce Maurice Q. Jones, Executive Director of PAR Recycle Works, who received $100,000 in 2023. Maurice?
Thanks, Anna. We needed that money. Let's talk about that. Yeah, so let me first tell you about PAR. PAR stands for People Advancing Reintegration. We are a not-for-profit whose mission is to reduce recidivism through electronics recycling. And as a not-for-profit ourselves, we are always, looking for that opportunity to connect with other grantors. And this was outside of who we had partnered with in the past. Let's talk about the impact, the direct impact that it's going to have on our participants. We use this funding to fund a training and job development coordinator that can help us to shore up the outcomes of our programming. So that's going to be really impactful as we move forward, to have that type of efficacy in someone directly related to making sure our guys get through programming, because it was all volunteer led before, and there's a different ownership when there's someone directly hired for that. And she's here. She's been here for about 90 days, and already we've had 5 people complete our program and get into full-time work. So it works directly, and that was the impact that we had hoped to have longer term. Talking about the grant application process, I think and my grant writer would agree that it was very much so involved. You are going to spend time on completing what Impact 100 wants, because there are many different eyes and many different lenses, and now we know that, that are going to be looking at the grant to get you awarded. Further, for the visit, there were like 15 or 16 people that came out to our site to see what we were doing, and I was not expecting that. However, I'm glad that we did, because there were a lot of mutual questions that were happening along that way, and I was happy to do that. I mean, it was different versus having 1 or 2 or 3 or 5 people come, to having 15 to 18 people come to our site to check out what we were doing, all from different backgrounds. So it was a pretty unique experience going through this process with Impact 100, but I also think that it'll prepare us for other more competitive, because this one is competitive, FYI, a competitive grant going forward. Questions? Yeah. So I'm happy to answer questions if I see any that are directly in the chat.
Thank you, Maurice. This is Denise.
Hey.
I will take the Q&A from here, and we'll open it up to all for questions. They can ask questions to anyone on the panel. But I first wanted to thank you very much for participating today and sharing your experience with the applicants on the call. It's always one of the most highly rated portions of our meetings, so we greatly appreciate it. We are now taking questions for anyone on the panel, or any questions you have about the process. We ask that you put your questions in the Q&A panel at the bottom of your screen, and I and others on the team will go through them and ask some of our panelists the questions. So let's start. Excuse me. Our panelists. So the first one, our organization falls within 2 focus areas. Is there anything to consider when choosing? I think if you look back to what Anna Maria talked about and the definitions of each of our FACs, we're trying very hard to focus people into the FAC that best represents their organization's mission and goals. Anyone like to add to that?
And where you would have the highest impact. in the example used.
Great. Thank you. And duration of the grant term, I think that was answered. For the larger ones, they are 2 years. For the smaller ones, they are 1. It looks like repeat grantees are fairly rare. We get a number of repeat grantees, and a conversation is typically had within each of the FAC areas, and that would be one of the things noted. Whether or not it positively or negative impacts, we can't really say one way or the other, but it is something that is noted when we discuss applications. Other additions to that? No? Okay. If you apply for a grant for 100,000, is it possible to be awarded for less than what is being asked? Or does your foundation choose a number of 100,000? What happens if, Alice, do you want to answer that? Please?
Sure. Everybody is applying for a $100,000 grant. Our funds we always give 5 grants, 1 in each of the 5 focus areas, and our funding doesn't always allow us to give 5 $100,000 grants. So typically, depending on our funding pool, we give the top contenders get 100, and those that get less votes from our membership will get the balance. We give out all the money, but that we taken in a year, but typically it's been 2 to 3 $100,000 grants, and then depending 2 or 3 grants of 50 or less.
Thank you. And Denise, there are a few questions here for you. Can we submit a draft of the most recent audited statements? Our final version will not be complete until after the grant deadline.
The requirement for eligibility is 3 full years of financial statements. So if you have 3 full years, but your most recent one is not available, you can give us the 3 full years. If, on the other hand, you don't have 3 full years and the 3rd year is only a draft, then we can't accept that draft. You would have to submit 3 full years of financial statements to be eligible.
Great, thank you. And the next one, do you have to restructure your financials in response to the grant? And I think what they mean is, do they have to format it in a specific way?
The answer to that is yes and no. When you initially apply, you give us 3 full years of audited financials that are in the format that your auditor uses, along with all of the comments that come with audited and reviewed financial statements. So for your first phase for applying, that is what you would use. If you make it to the next level and we ask for the additional financials, at that time, we do ask you for your more recent information given to us in a form that we provide to you.
Okay, and I think this is an adjunct to that. Can we submit a draft of the most recent audited statements? Did I just ask that one?
In the second round,
Sorry about that.
if you make it to the second round, you can. In the first, when you actually apply and you're determining whether or not you're eligible, we have to have 3 full years of financial statements, the most recent that you have.
Great, thank you. Does the organization have to have a budget between 300 and 3 million? Alice? Oh.
Okay.
I'll give you a break for a minute, Denise.
The answer is no, you don't have to. It is a preference on our side, but it is not a requirement.
Could I add a little something to that? Just some color. That is, you don't have to be within that window, as Alice said. However, what we've learned from this is that if you're under 300,000, then very often the questions of the members will be around the strength of the organization and their ability to absorb a large grant. If you are over 3 million and you're on that high end, then very often the question that the members bring to the table is, do they really need the money from us? And will this grant have sufficient impact? So if you're outside the funding preferences, we would encourage you to build on what Alice had said earlier about the why now section of your application. You may want to address directly those questions about, yes, we're outside your funding preferences, but here's why we believe we should be considered, and keep in the back of your mind those concerns that we've generally seen from members around the smaller or larger organizations.
And that one of our priorities, just to reinforce what Denise is saying, is to fund lesser known organizations. So that can apply to both the smaller side and the larger side, depending on how you as a grantee address that issue. And I think I see Maurice shaking his, agreeing with that. And I think they were one of the lesser knowns, but we were impressed with.
And thank you, ladies. There are a few questions in here that refer back to what you just described. So I am not going to answer those here. If you still feel at the end that your question was not answered, please put it, I'll ask at the end of the session, are there any other questions? Please add it back there. But I think a lot of the questions were answered with recent discussion. So thank you. What is the role of geography in awarding grants? Is part of your effort to cover as wide an area as possible? Alice?
We only fund within the 5-county area. So if you're outside of that, you're outside of that is a requirement, not a preference. Other than that, we have different groups of people who are of members who are reviewing the grants every year. We do like to spread it around, but it isn't between the geographic areas, but there is no mandate to do that. It's a consideration. It's really where we feel like we're going to have the most impact.
Great, thank you. Are there any restrictions around faith-based organizations? And I'll answer that if you guys can jump in with extra. There are no restrictions. What we do not fund are faith-based activities, but we will fund faith-based organizations if they are doing things for a greater good or a non-faith-based good. I don't think that was right, but.
And an example being like providing food services, which many faith-based organizations provide, meals and things.
Thank you. Can city government apply? Alice? Denise?
Yeah, I think Denise and I are probably going to say the same thing. Go ahead, Denise. It would be very hard to separate the financials and the government.
Yeah.
Can you give an example of a work plan? I think that was one of the requirements we talked about. Anyone?
We're all stymied here. Sorry. More than a budget, because we're not looking for specific work plans.
Well, maybe Maurice can just describe a little bit how he presented in his proposal.
I mean, somebody did ask about the why now, and that's interwoven. Like we had a plan, a longer strategy about what this position would do longer term and what that impact would be for our organization. So we had to build the plan of how we're going to utilize this person longer term. We're going to utilize this person that we hired through the grant to double our impact, double our participant graduation rate over the next 2 years. And so we had to back into that. What does that look like? How many more people do we need to hire? How many more people do we need to get hired? and building that plan out. So that's, hopefully that answers that question.
Thank you, Maurice. Denise, are fiscal agents required for organizations with budgets under 300,000? We wouldn't,
Go ahead, Denise.
Are fiscal agents required? Is that the question?
yes.
We don't have a requirement that in that regard at all. It's really just whether or not you can stand as an independently audited institution. And so that's really where the requirement breaks down for some institutions that are just growing and they're just starting out, that they may not be there yet and might need to get to the next level to get there. So it's really those 3 years of audited financial statements that are the requirement that would probably apply to the smaller institutions. That's the hurdle that tends to be a little more challenging as an organization is coming of age.
And this is another question along that line. Can an organization apply through their fiscal sponsor if they're awaiting 501c3 status?
That's a challenge, again, because you have to be able to indicate that you are independently audited and have 501c3s. So if you're affiliated with a broader 501c3, so you have an affiliation, but you can demonstrate that your financials are segregated, then you'll be considered. Often that doesn't happen, but if it does in your case, then we can consider you.
Thank you. And just as a reminder, we are holding a question and answer session at noon on February 14th, specifically for these types of financial questions. There's a link in the chat, and there's also a link on the application page of our website.
I believe we have one scheduled for November too, Denise, don't we?
What did I say? I'm sorry.
I think
November
you said
14th.
February.
Oh, I'm sorry. I said the wrong thing. November 14th at noon.
Thank you.
Thank you for that. We have a couple questions for Maurice. Did you have to restructure your financials in response to the grant?
The answer to that question was yes and no. So we had already been planning to add this position, but when this opportunity presented itself, and we just had to make the case for it and add it into, what our budget already was. I mean, we did have to just add this position and talk and what that looked like.
Thank you. And the next one, did you present your program at the annual meeting?
I did, and it was not that bad after I got up there, but I did. It was a little nerve-wracking to do that, and yes, I did present at the annual meeting.
Thank you. If your nonprofit office is in New Jersey, but you fund programs in Philadelphia, can you apply? And whomever wants to answer that.
Yeah, and Denise backed me up on this one. Yeah, you can, but only if the funds are clearly segregated, because you can show that our funds will only be used for Philadelphia 5-county area programs. And your finances are divided that way.
Okay, thank you. How many applications were received last year? I think we had about 200 or so across all of the FACs.
It was like 217 or so.
Mm-hmm.
And how do you manage a site visit for an organization that has no physical address?
And I think I answered that in the chat maybe, but we will go see your program location if you have programs that you provide that maybe we've gone to schools and other locations to see your operations. We do require that the staff or the administrative people from the organization, of course, present there, but we don't need to be in a physical office if you want us to come see a program.
Thank you. If we applied last year and made it to the final round, does it make sense to apply again? Can we get feedback from last year?
If you applied last year and you weren't a $100,000 finalist, oh, yes, you can apply again. And yes, you can get some feedback from the organization. And I would suggest, if you're looking for that, that you reach out directly to either NPL or best to Anna Maria and I at grants at Impact 100.
Thank you. Historically, do any of the categories tend to be more popular or competitive than others? And Alice, I think that's you.
Yeah, they are all competitive, as Maurice said. Popular is a tough word. There are a lot of organizations that provide multiple services. I think one of the questions was, a lot of people's programs provide both education and other services. So sometimes education is got more, but we give a grant in each of the 5 areas based on the impact in that area. It varies from years to years what's popular.
Thank you. And Denise, is a budget template provided?
A budget template is provided in the second round. So when you send in your application, you will be asked for the 3 years of audited financials. At that point, you're giving us exactly what your auditors gave you. When we get to the next round, if you're requested to provide further financial information, we will provide you the template along with the request for your budget and your year to dates, which can be in any format you want them in.
Thank you. And does the financial segregation also apply to programs of a church? The church is audited, I believe, but we have not been a program of the church.
Let me make sure I'm understanding that. So there's a program that's not a program of the church, but then the program is not a standalone institution. So we would have the financials would have to be standalone for us to be able to consider it, because otherwise we would be funding the church, unless there's some nuance to that I'm not understanding. So feel free to attend on the 14th or send us a note separately if there's a nuance that I'm not getting in that.
Thank you. If an organization whose revenue exceeds 3 million, we are an organization whose revenue exceeds 3 million. Could we apply if we demonstrate the need, i.e. answer the question, why now? And yes, you can do that. And that why now will probably be one of the critical questions that you answer. Oh, and the gentleman is replying, it's a program of the church, Denise, from the last question.
So chances are then we would be funding a church, and we don't fund religious organizations. So that's likely not to fly.
If we did not make it past the LOI stage, can we get feedback?
We don't have an LOI stage any longer, so that would have been from a couple of years ago, in which case it'd be tough to give you feedback only in that we don't necessarily have the history. We do have a first stage of review, and we do have comments from every stage that we keep record of. So if it's just, you mean you didn't get past the first phase to be asked for financials, we can probably provide you some feedback if that was from last year.
I think I could add a little something to that, if you don't mind, which is in the first eligibility screen. So think about it, you apply, we do a screen to say, does this applicant meet the base eligibility requirements? If you do not, then we'll give you that feedback. We'll say you didn't meet the eligibility requirements. In the financial space, we can give you feedback if you don't meet our requirements. So that piece is direct and measurable feedback that we can give you from that perspective. When the members are making decisions about groups that move forward, that's when, as Alice said, there's a little more judgment involved, and we don't always have one reason why one organization was chosen over another. You may be perfect, but everybody else was too. So in the financial space, it's a little easier for us to give you feedback in the event that something is not sufficient, and we have to let you know that you were missing something. And we do that with back and forth if there's an issue with something being missing.
Thank you. And Denise, this one is also for you. What are the limitations if you are a locally based chapter of a national organization?
The biggest challenge, if you're there in that space, is first of all, can you segregate your financials? If you can segregate that and tell the story that, yes, you're affiliated with this organization, but you have the standalone capability to bring in the funds and use the funds and have the impact in this region. If you can do that, then there's no reason why you can't go forward. It's just a challenge that very often organizations don't have to meet and are not comfortable meeting it. So it depends on your level of comfort in being able to meet our requirements, because it may not match with exactly the way you're used to telling your story. You'd have to tell your story and have your financials aligned. And the local segregation of funds becomes really critical at that juncture, because we would want to make sure that your funds don't go to another city or another state and then get allocated back to you, because then that is not considered segregation of funds.
Great, thank you. This is one of the last questions. So if people have additional questions, please let us know. Looking for additional clarity. If the parent 501c3 company for which there are audited financial has a budget that exceeds 3 million, but the specific program for which funding is being applied has a much smaller budget, would we be eligible? And I'll take that one, and please jump in. Our recommendation is the 300,000 to 300,000 to 3 million. That is not, you do not have to have that. So if you have compelling reasons that you think that you should be considered, please apply. There are no hard and definite restrictions around the financing like that. Other questions?
I'm going to jump in and just answer one question I see here about the meeting on the 14th. Is it a general Zoom, not so much individual questions? And that is really a program, an opportunity for Q&A in the financial regard. So there won't be a presentation. It will just be taking questions.
This is something new that we're trying this year, so we'll be very interested to see your feedback and if it's valuable. We're hoping it's one of the areas where we do get a lot of questions, so we're hoping that we can meet your questions or answer your questions prior to application time. Any other questions? Or Impact 100, do we see any other questions that I've missed? And this is another clarification for religion. You said that you just don't fund religious programs. We are a program of the church, but not religiously focused in any way. It's a food bank. So yes, that would be, if you comply with the other request, you would easily be considered for a grant.
Have to show the financials separately.
This was asked before, and can a fiduciary show their financials for the applicant? Do you know what that means, Denise?
It's possible, but we would have to see the details to find out how that relationship works, because the fiduciary would be a separate organization. And that's where it becomes troublesome to be able to demonstrate that you are an independent organization. By definition, if you have a fiscal sponsor or a fiduciary, you're likely not independent, and we're looking for independence. And that's where it becomes troublesome. If, however, in your case, it's an unusual structure and you want to make the case, then let's talk.
Thank you. And Maurice, if there's any question or anything that you think would help applicants that's not been asked here, I'll give you a few minutes and ask just a few more questions. Please let us know.
Yeah, I think just one of the things that I would mention that it is time consuming. It is going, but that's just like any grant. Dedicate the time to it, and it will be fruitful if you're selected. So just take the time. It is a little bit more rigorous than some other grants, but the team is really responsive from Impact 100 to answer any questions going forward. So just know that it is going to be time consuming. It is a little bit more rigorous than some other grants, but the team is responsive and answering your questions as you're moving forward.
Thank you. I think just two more questions. Would a capital improvement project that provides new community services apply?
It could,
Qualify.
as long, it could apply as long as we're not funding the funding. We won't contribute to a capital fund, but as if it's operational money being spent, that does qualify because it's part of your program operations.
Thank you. And this one is for clarification. There are 5 counties and 5 total awards. So do the awards go to the organizations from each county? The awards actually go to the FACs, and these are on our website, the focus area committees. So it's subject related, arts and culture, education, etc. Applicants can be from the 5 county areas, again, on our website to apply. This is one I haven't seen, Denise. What about reserve savings? What is an acceptable reserve level?
That's an excellent question, because the women who are voting on which organizations go forward take into consideration very much how much you have in liquid assets. It's a judgment call. There's not a hard and fast. We don't have a disqualification based on it. We have funded organizations that are a little lighter on cash and some that have a little more cash. But there's a judgment that's brought to bear about, do they have enough cash that they don't need our award or our grant, and therefore it won't have much impact? Or are their financials weak enough that maybe they're not as strong as we'd like them to be? So it's very much a nuance and a judgment call, but we do look at that. That is part of our financial review and an important piece of what we offer to our members as information on your financial profile.
Great, thank you. And last questions, we manage the emergency rental assistant program from the government. The pass-through money puts us well over the 3 million limit. Our operating costs are below 3 million. Would a paragraph of explanation help?
That would be very helpful, because the members do see that scenario, and helping them understand that the pass-through money is not really money that you have available for your services is helpful. It's very helpful to try to explain that, because it's a nuance that's not always appreciated by folks who don't have a financial bent.
Great, thank you very much. And I think that is the conclusion of our program today. Thank you to all the participants, and especially thank you to those who have attended today. We appreciate your interest in Impact 100's grants. Few reminders: November 14th at noon is the financial Q&A session. There's a link on our website. And November 29th at midnight is the application deadline for Impact 100's grants for this year. Thank you, everyone. We look forward to receiving your grants, and good luck to everyone.
And you
Thank
will
you.
receive a copy of the recording.